Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
How's it going? Who's leading tonight?
We didn't decide. It's not me. I was last week. It's RFM.
Hey, I can't even hear myself. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, then it's definitely me. Me and Alexander. What is the Hague?
David Alexander.
We'll be in charge. Okay.
Okay.
Glad we decided this. I am in the new Radio Free Mormon studios. We're calling it the John Dehlin Memorial Studio. We want to keep his name in remembrance. So all the podcasters from me on out will be called Podcaster Dehlin the first, and then there'll be Podcaster Dehlin the second. This all makes perfect sense if you know what I'm talking about. But at any rate, I'm down here in Utah. I haven't had a lot to do in order to get ready for the show, but I have done some. And I understand that there was some news that happened at the end of a trial that happened in Idaho last Thursday with Chad Daybell, I believe it is. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Hey, Bill, how are you doing? Rebecca, how are you doing?
Excellent.
I'm
Excellent.
Okay.
Ready for there's an echo there. I don't know what that's from.
I'm glad to hear
I
that.
know.
And Rebecca probably doesn't want to that fight she was almost involved in Saturday night.
No, I do not want to discuss that. However, RFM and I did have dinner at an IHOP. It was really fun.
Yeah, those are crazy places. You don't know what's going on in IHOP in the middle of the night. Things can
No
get very
idea.
feisty real fast. So, do we have the list of stories?
Yeah.
There's the top stories. Number 1, Daybell news. Sounds like me. Number 2, after 30 years, new hymns are trickling in. Update on the proposed McKinney LDS temple. I'm guessing that's going to be Rebecca Biblioteca, and it's going to be exciting. And church growth analysis. So we've got Daybell news. Daybell news up off the top. And it's what everybody I expect already knows. Yes, Chad Daybell did get convicted, like his wife, of murdering her 2 children and his wife as well. There were straight up murder charges. There were conspiracy charges as well. And then there were a couple of charges involving finances, which I think had to do with getting some insurance policies, life insurance policies on certain people who were not long for this earth, and then collecting on them after you shuffled them off this mortal coil yourself. That's against the law. So one thing that I did notice as I was looking at this, and let me also say he was convicted of that. There was a very brief, very expedited, at least in my experience, death penalty hearing where he was convicted on, I believe it was Thursday, and they started the death penalty hearing on Friday, and it was concluded with the jury's deliberations by Saturday with a declaration that he would be executed for his crimes. That was the jury's decision. Now, that's what happened a couple days ago, and this is June 3rd, 2024, I believe it is. So I don't expect to be alive when Chad Daybell gets executed. But if I am, I'll be there with the front row center ticket and the popcorn.
It is a strange thing, isn't it, when folks are given the conviction and given the death penalty and all the amount of time, years, appeals, and all kinds of things that need to work themselves out before someone actually has to face the music of that moment.
It can be quite frustrating for people as well. I mean, am I the only one who, when somebody gets executed for a murder, looks immediately for the date of the murder and the date of his or her conviction, which is usually 20 years old and more so, and just go, what on earth? But I will tell you something that I found out that actually plays into this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it if I could. This is why it was that I see. I've already forgotten their names. I've already assigned them to the desk tree.
Lori Vallow.
I think it's better. I think it's more appropriate if we just forget all their names and don't ever mention them again. But yeah, why Lori Vallow skipped on the death penalty, and Her husband, Chad Daybell, just got the death penalty when they were both convicted, really, of the same crimes, I believe. I believe it's pretty much mirror images of the same crimes. And I had known sort of generically that there had been some kind of mix-up, some procedural error, but I hadn't actually read anything that spelled it out until I was researching this morning for tonight's show and found out that it was the prosecutor's office that screwed things up. So you've got these people who are charged, and we all remember the days and weeks and months leading up to their even being arrested and charged, and they're over there in Hawaii, and the kids are missing, and absolute insanity. And I think it was just before COVID as well. But what happens is that Lori and he get arrested finally. They get put in jail. They're arraigned. And then Lori, there are questions about whether she is mentally competent to stand trial. And mental competency to stand trial is not the same as an insanity defense. There are similarities to them, but they're very different. An insanity defense, which I understand they don't really have much of in Idaho. Otherwise, I think it would have been front and center in this case. But the insanity defense has to do with whether your state of mind, whatever the actual thing might be, it's generally whether you knew the difference between right and wrong at the time of the act. In other words, whether you suffered from a mental disability or mental issue to the extent that you did not know the difference between right and wrong at the time of the incident, or if you suffered from a mental issue such that you didn't know what you were doing. You were not even aware of what it was you were doing. So those are not easy things to prove, but they have been proven from time to time. That's the insanity defense. It has to do with the time of the event. Competency to stand trial has to do not with the event of the incident, but the event of the trial, because a person has to have some basic mental competency to stand trial in our country, which is defined usually as having basic understanding of the legal process. You don't have to have gone to law school or anything, but you have to be aware enough of what's going on around you that you can assist your attorney in your case, the defense of your case. So you got Lori. That was a big question as to whether she could stand trial. So they went through that process. That made things go longer than they would have otherwise. I think COVID certainly made things go longer than they would have otherwise. And they're both joined for trial as co-defendants and set for trial. I think it was April of 2023. So here we're coming up, April 2023. They're both joined for trial. And now the prosecutor all of a sudden says, Rutrow, where are these boxes of discovery that just showed up that we haven't given to the defendants, either of them or their attorneys? I'm not sure what was in that discovery. All I know is that it was discovery and it was late. So on the evening of trial, which would be a few days before trial, the prosecutor dumps off all this discovery on both their attorneys. And now that puts them in a dilemma, legally speaking, which is one of being forced to make a choice between which constitutional right you want as a person charged with a crime. Do you want the one that says you have the right to a speedy trial? Or do you want the one that says that you have the right to be represented by an attorney who knows what he's doing? Competency, right? Because even if you have the best attorney in the world, that attorney can't be competent if they just got boxes of new discovery dropped on them.
Radio Free Mormon.
You're very, very kind. I appreciate you, Bill. I really do. And I'm not hearing anything from Rebecca, though. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. As I was saying, I appreciate you, Bill. I really do. So anyway, that's the situation that they were in. And in this situation, they made two different choices. And what Lori wanted to do was she says, I don't care. I'm going to go to trial now. So the judge says, okay, well, you can go to trial now, but you have to, recognize you just got all this discovery and I will give you a continuance if you want one. She says, no. Chad, on the other hand, says, no, I want a continuance because I want to be able to test some of this. I think some of it had to do even with DNA testing, some important stuff that you might want to have sent off to an independent analyst and have it double checked. So they went ahead and they did that. Now, the death penalty was on the table from the beginning. It wasn't a matter of late filing, which I had thought before. What happened is that because Lori says, no, I'm going to go to trial and I'm not going to continue to waive my right to a speedy trial. even though you're giving me that choice, what the judge says is, okay, well, this is the prosecutor's screw up. So the prosecutor has to pay the price for it. And what we're going to do is, if you're going to go to trial for it on this bunches of new discovery, then we're taking the death penalty off the table. So that's how it was that she ended up going to trial, getting convicted, getting life sentences, and Chad did not.
So
That
if
makes sense.
Chad would have waived his right to a speedy trial, he also might have had that.
He did waive his right to a speedy trial, which is why it was continued by the judge. If he had insisted on his right to a speedy trial along with his wife, then they would have been tried together, I expect.
Okay.
And because I don't think there's any other reason why they would have been separated or severed, using the legal term. So yeah, he would have avoided the death penalty if he had plunged ahead. But you see, what you're doing is you're putting your finger on right why this is such a difficult decision to make and to be thrust in. What choice do you make when you're in this decision and you've been in jail, but you're looking at a death penalty case and you get all the stuff that's thrown on you at the last minute before trial? You haven't had a chance to test it, maybe not even to read it very well, to consider what it means or see where it might lead up to. Are you going to now say, okay, I will give up the right to go through this stuff and see what it is I'm looking at in exchange for getting a life sentence? Or do you insist on your right to look at the information that's being used against you and go through the discovery, if that means that you go from having worst case scenario, a life sentence, to worst case scenario, a death penalty? And that's what we've seen happen.
Yeah.
I think it's good or bad, but that's why you're not supposed to be throwing in discovery at the last minute. And I'm sure the prosecutors were surprised wherever they found it, wherever the cops found it. You know, I don't know if it was in a prosecutor's office or in a evidence locker room or in a cop's office who was an investigator, but somebody goofed it up.
If they had agreed, regardless of which direction, they would have not gotten, she would not have gotten a lesser penalty as a possible conviction, right?
If she had agreed to extend her speedy trial, get it continued along with Chad, and if the jury come back the same way, then I have no reason to, well, I don't know.
And then if Chad had gone the other way,
I think the judge would have come back anyway on Lori with a death penalty. Or actually, I think the jury would have, because it's the jury who decides it. But I don't know. Maybe not. That's another thing we'll never know.
yeah. And if Chad had gone the other way and they had decided in her, you know, with the way she wanted it to be, maybe also it seems like them disagreeing but being tried to get together forced somebody to get a little bit better deal.
She would not have had the option of having no death penalty on the table with the jury if she had continued it. Continued trial.
Just, completely off topic, just strange question. Life in prison or death penalty, man, do people really get that used to life in prison that that's better? You know, especially since you're going to be in a prison with people who know that you've killed children, which won't go well for you either.
Yeah, they do a lot of work to try and keep certain segments of the prison population separate. It doesn't always work, but they sure try to, because it is in the best interest of jail staff and prison staff to not have a lot of violence and to keep people calm. So that's in their interest. I know a lot of times people say, well, you look at these people in prison and they're doing this and they're doing that and they're playing this game or they're watching this show. And you go, yeah, I know what you're saying, because that doesn't sound like punishment to you. On the other hand, if you didn't have any of that stuff, it would be a lot more difficult for these jail and prison guards to keep, you know, things copacetic.
Yeah.
So when you do have the death penalty, are you typically then isolated in prison? That was a question I was talking over with friends.
I think once it gets to a certain place, which this is not at yet, and Idaho law is very different from the law of the state where I practiced. So I don't even want to guess. I know that Idaho really takes things very seriously. If it was here in Washington state, okay, I think that what would have happened is that there would have been a guilty finding, and then it would have been set over for like at least 40 days to have the second hearing about the penalty phase and whether it should be death penalty. Because at that hearing, it's a completely different kind of hearing from the murder trial. All you're concerned about in the murder trial is, did this person commit murder and can it be proven beyond a reasonable doubt? All you're concerned about at the sentencing trial is, okay, this guy got convicted of something really, really bad. So analyzing it, how bad is it compared to other things that people have gotten the death penalty for? He was a good guy in school. He really liked his mom. He gave her presents on Mother's Day. The teachers, all this other stuff comes in. Typically, to try and get the jury to feel some kind of shred of remorse that will make them say, okay, we'll just let this person live forever behind bars. But Idaho, yeah, they get right to it.
Or maybe there was nothing like that. Maybe there were no Mother's Day gifts or teachers that liked him.
I heard he wrote some books, but
A few.
So anyway, that's about all I have to say, except for I used to be very much in favor of the death penalty. And, in some occasions, I still think that I am. The problem isn't for me killing another person, because I could do that easy. The problem is, well, certain people, you understand. Okay. The problem isn't the taking of another person's life if they deserve it, in my opinion. The problem is you have the government involved. And whenever you have the government involved, you're going to have the chance not only for screw ups, but also for things that are done wrong that aren't just screw ups. And what happened in this case is a classic example of the night before trial, or on the eve of trial, a few days before trial. All of a sudden, there's like boxes of documents that we didn't give you. Now, my recollection is, and I know there are people who will check this, so hopefully I'll get this right, okay? My recollection is with the Oklahoma City bombing, which was a horrible event. And I think it was Timothy LaVey. Is that right?
McVeigh.
McVeigh. Thank you very much.
McVeigh, like McDonald's.
Timothy McVeigh. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
That's the fillet of fish.
He got convicted, as you know, and he was sentenced to death, and he was executed. And I think it was not long after he was executed that the government agency, was it ATF? Was it FBI? I don't know. Who?
Yeah.
Department of Justice. I believe they discovered boxes and boxes and boxes of documents that they had not provided to the defense before the trial. And this is after the execution. And I don't know what's in the boxes, but these are the kind of things that can happen when government's involved. And that's why I'm a little bit tepid on the death penalty issue.
Do we know what was in the boxes that the prosecutor discovered at the last minute? Do we know what those materials were? Like I said, I followed Lori so closely, but when it came to Chad, I just almost didn't have the stomach for it anymore. I could not follow it as closely as a lot of other podcasters. So I just wonder if that came out. What were the materials?
I don't know. And I know that there were some people and some friends of mine who've been watching this avidly. To me, it almost strikes me that interest in the Chad Daybell portion it seemed less by comparison with what happened last year with Lori Vallow, because it is the same story. And she got convicted, and here comes, Chad. It's almost, I had the sense it was the same kind of feeling that a lot of people had when it came time for O.J. Simpson to be put on trial in the civil suit. Sort of aware it's happening, but not really following it as closely. And I'm not saying that means anything about the value of these children and these people who are killed horrifically. It's just more been there, done that. And I think a lot of people are ready to move on to the next sensational story.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you covered that, because I did have several people in discussion say, what does that mean? Why did she, or why didn't she? Why did he? So I'm glad that you covered that, because I think it is one of the remaining questions.
Well, thank you. It was a pretty big case for me. It wasn't a murder case, but it was a big case, and it was a high profile in a little town. And this got to be, I don't know, 15 years ago, 18 years ago. It's like the Wednesday before trial starting at Monday. And all of a sudden I'm in my office, and then a person from the prosecutor's office comes running by with a big stack of documents and puts them up there for me to look at. And I walk up there and say, well, that's interesting, because usually they don't run them by. They only run them by if it's an emergency. And of course, the fact it's the Wednesday before makes that pretty clear. It's an emergency. Oh, they're throwing a bunch of emergency documents on me, huh? So there's probably 300 to 400 pages. And I looked at the top, and of course I already had that. So I just turned the whole thing over and grabbed the clump at the bottom, because that's where they stuck the new documents. All the rest were just duplicates. And that was the whole point of it.
Mm.
So I went to the judge. I did go to the judge on an emergency basis, and asking for, relief. Either whatever's in here, should not be allowed as evidence in trial. And the judge looks at me and says, okay, well, I'll tell you what, Mr. RFM, I'll give you a choice. I hate it when judges give you a choice. He says, you can either have a continuance of the trial, and my guy, he was not even in custody. So the speedy trial ramifications are less compelling with a person who's not in custody than a person who is in custody. That's why I say he wasn't even in custody. And I'd already looked at the documents and knew it didn't make that much difference. So we full speed aheaded it.
What was your other choice? You could either have a continuance or...
Oh, we could either go now or get a continuance, but he wasn't going to do anything to suppress that information.
Yeah, nothing changed. It's either now or later.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a week of verdicts. That's all we'll say, right?
Yeah. Wow. Is the mood here really down? I sense there's a drop in energy. What's going on with you two? Is it me?
No, it's not you. We're good.
Yeah.
My Lord.
No, I have to say somebody texted me and said, the verdict's in last week. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to be more clear because I'm waiting on 4 verdicts right now. So you're going to have to tell me what it is. It could be Chad. It could be, of course, something more on the national landscape. It could also be Heber Valley Temple or Cody Temple. There are 4 verdicts that I'm waiting for.
That's amazing. And I know one of them is going to be tomorrow night. Does this happen at all to segue into what you're going to be talking about next,
No,
Rebecca?
not one bit.
Oh, geez, Rebecca.
I mean, possibly. I don't know the order of the slides. I didn't pay attention. No, not at all. We have to come up with a segue from Chad Daybell into church music. Any idea?
He's going to face the music. On to you, Rebecca.
That's it. I love it. We knew Bill could do it. We knew he could do it. That's exactly right. Yep. Now, let me see if I can move my own slides. Yes, I can. That was really good. I have to say.
Sorry, RFM. You guys asked and I delivered and it wasn't that good, but now we've moved on. So
no, I spent the afternoon listening to Bill on my podcast, Mormonish, in a kind of debate discussion with Michelle Stone about polygamy and land deeds. That was very interesting, and Bill did a really good job. Bill has a lot of finesse, I would say is the word.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm looking forward to watching that. I watched a little bit of it. I made a couple comments and I had to go and do other things. So I think that'll be great. And I'm excited to hear what Bill thought of it, because when I hear the name Michelle Stone, I can only think of one thing.
Which is?
One fingernail and the longest chalkboard in the world.
My goodness. Well, there
I'll
you
share
go.
my thoughts at the end.
Yeah. I thought it was a good, healthy debate. I thought it was really good. Happy to moderate. So, all right, facing the music, whatever that means, we are going to talk about new hymns for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which were released last week or maybe the week before, because we did miss one of the newscasts where we dared to take a vacation, right? Over Memorial Day. So the headline in the Trib, Salt Lake Tribune, is here are the new hymns just released by the Church of Jesus Christ. So the article goes on to say it has been an arduous and unexpectedly rich 6-year process. Can you guys believe it's been 6 years since we first heard about new hymns?
You know, when you're going by some kind of road construction and there's like one guy down in the hole and 16 guys leaning on their shovels and watching, that's what I picked with this hymn book thing.
Are they writing new songs from scratch, or are they?
No. And this is what we're going to talk about. This is why this is so surprising. So it took a long process to cull the best choices from some 17,000 submissions. So they did put out that call, submit your poetry, submit your tunes. And then people put those together into these songs. 66 countries across the world, people submitted different ideas to the church. This is now in a book called Hymns for Home and Church. And I don't know if everybody realizes this, but a third of the book will be children's songs and the rest will be for adults. So no longer will you have the primary songbook. For those of you that don't know, there was a separate book full of music for children and a separate book full of music for adults. And it's all going to be in the same wonderful book now. And I think this graphic here is what possibly might be on the cover. I've not seen an actual picture of the hymn book because right now they're just releasing things digitally, but I think it might be that. I think it might be green like the former one, but with the new church logo. So we'll see what they come up with. says the new book will include hymns from previous collection, songs that have been composed by LDS saints over the past 40 years, and selections from other Christian traditions, in addition to some brand new submissions. So it's a huge hodgepodge of things. And the pictures there on the right, some of the songs were performed at the conference center, I believe, to introduce the new hymns. And, when I scroll past that and I look at those pictures, I think Christian band. What do you guys think? It just looks very different.
It doesn't look Mormon, does it?
That's what I'm trying to say. It looks like I've attended a lot of different Christian churches, the kinds with the monitors up and the singing and the praising. It looks just like that to me. So a very different look.
Didn't guitars used to not be allowed at all? Yeah,
exactly.
That was in the handbook. The handbook said you cannot use string instruments.
Yep, that's exactly right. And now that, I believe, is gone from the handbook. So there is this thought that maybe it will kind of morph into guitars or drums. Some of the things that you see just standard in other electric guitar, other Christian churches. So that would be fascinating.
Anything's better than the high councilman speaking.
Anything is better. Yeah. Because for those of you that don't know, prior to maybe some new wiggle room here on instruments, it was only a stringed instrument, right? You could play like a harp or a violin. You could play, I believe, a flute. I've heard flute solos, and of course a keyboard. But yeah, it was very, very rigid kind of an interpretation. So very reverent. So let me see what else. Batches from the Sacred Music Collection of between 450 and 500 hymns are going to be in this new book, and they're going to be released digitally, like we just saw, kind of a batch at a time. So there isn't going to be a hymn book for a while. We'll get into the timeline, but they're just going to be kind of released. So lots of PR kind of stretched out over a long time. And the pictures that I included here, because I have mentioned before that I was a former primary pianist. And since I was 11 years old, I've been a primary pianist, maybe had 1 or 2 year break to be a teacher, but pretty much that's all they let me do at church, which is fine with me. And so I thought, well, where's my songbook? Because I've had the same songbook for years, So I went to a closet, and there it was in my church bag, like some kind of weird time capsule. Like I looked inside, there were some Altoids, there was a tithing slip, there was this book. I mean, it really was a very strange trip down memory lane. So I just wanted to prove to everybody that, yes, I was a former primary pianist. I took these pictures last night. There's the book on the top, and there's a hymn book next to it that I also found in my bag. Anybody that has ever been a primary pianist, the picture underneath it shows all the paper clips that I put in the book for the songs that you had to play right away, because primary is notorious for the chorister saying, all right, we're going to have, when they don't prepare, we're going to have choose your favorite song time, kids. And then the pianist has to be like, okay, we're ready to go. It's going to be Book of Mormon stories. That's going to be, so all those paper clips are the popular songs. And there I am playing the piano. This is my piano I've had since I was 6 years old, where I practiced for the primary piano. So I had a little trip down memory lane preparing for this portion of the newscast. So this is the timeline that we were talking about. We'll go through this really quickly. In 18 of June, it was announced there's going to be a new hymn book. People went ballistic, right? In 2023, a year later, they said, okay, this is actually going to be a book that's consolidated, and it's not going to come out for like 10 more years. So the enthusiasm maybe went down just a little bit, but people did start making submissions. In 2024, where we are now, we see this first batch of hymns being released. Now, in 2026 is when we can look forward to the actual book, a book that you can hold in your hands. And of course, everything will be available digitally too. And then in 2030, it says the project will be completed, and this will be everything translated into 50 languages. So I'm not kidding when I say it's like a 10-year, 12-year process.
You take people who know English and then they know this other second language. Does it really take 4 years?
It might. I mean, when you're translating music, you kind of have to make it rhyme. Or at least, I don't know exactly how that translation process works, but I think it's much more complex. I think about I Am a Child of God in Spanish. You guys probably have been asked to sing that before at some point, maybe, and it doesn't quite fit. You kind of have to kind of make it fit a little bit.
In a church with the gift of tongues, you would think it would be easier.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the few places. What?
It's the rhyming part that's hard. And I want to know about these batches. I mean, We don't need no stinking batches. Why are they using batches?
Yeah, well, I think you're going to figure this out as we go along. So I went onto the church website. There was frequently asked questions about the hymn book, where they're going to answer these questions that we might have. So one of them is, what has been the process for approving these songs? And it says the main task of these committees is to recommend music to the senior leaders of the church. The recommendations come from the church's global library, hymns originating from other Christian faiths. I'm going to put a big asterisk right there, and 17,000 original pieces submitted by members and people for the new hymn book. In some cases, the committee also recommends text and music revisions of existing songs to align each piece with the criteria of this collection. And we'll talk about that. So the senior leaders of the church, including the quorum of the 12 apostles and the first presidency, counsel together about these recommendations, and they personally approved the music collection. So I, of course, went to my favorite AI art generator and I said, senior apostles approving music. And this is what it came up with. I wish it was this, don't you? They just look so awesome. They're like playing the music. They've got their guitars. I wish that would happen, but I don't think that's what happened.
That looks like 4 former BYU students. They were back in college when they originally submitted these.
Yeah.
I feel like you might be right. But anyway, rest assured, every single one of these songs has been approved by the upper leadership and the first presidency itself. So that's good to know. You're not going to be singing anything that's going to sing you into apostasy. Okay, another question.
Sorry, do you know if they had different scores for like the lyrics and for the beat? I give it a 74. I like the music, but you can't dance to it.
Yeah, but you can't dance to it. That's right. Yep, I get that. So what are some of the criteria for the new songs? So this I thought was really interesting. All decisions about the new collection are based on 5 guiding principles. There always have to be guiding principles, right? That were informed and approved by the first presidency. These criteria guide the review, editing, and leader approval process for every single piece of music, all the way up to the quorum of the 12 apostles and the first presidency. Again, they are just stressing that this has the stamp of approval on it. The music included in the new hymns for home and church should, and these are the things that they look at when they choose music, increase faith and worship of Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. Teach the core doctrine of the gospel with power and clarity. Invite joyful singing at home and at church. Well, now that's something I've yet to really see joyful singing at church. It's a little more dirge-like. Maybe some of these new songs will invite the joyful singing. Also, comfort the weary and inspire members to endure in faith. So that gives me a clue to perhaps what some of the themes of some of the songs might be. And 5th, to unify members throughout the church. So those are the principles that they're looking at when they're approving music. And again, I included a picture of just another faith praising and singing, because I really do feel that's kind of the direction that the church is going with everything I'm reading here about it. Do you guys have any comments on the guiding principles for the new songs?
I'm just one.
Oh, yeah, we're just saying the same thing. Go ahead, Billy. Tell us what you were wondering first.
I'm just wondering if anybody in the church could tell us what the core doctrines of the church are, since every one of them has changed. And most importantly, maybe they've changed significantly in the last decade.
Yeah, much more salient than mine. I was just going to say, I wonder if they could have a criteria in there that, you like the song or something.
Oh, no, that's not what's going to happen. And it's possible that this core doctrine will be revealed through the music. We're going to have to see.
My submission, Carry On My Wayward Son. Did it make it?
Oh, I don't think so. I wish that it would have. Somebody was really, really pushing for Poker Face, which I would have loved that. Can you imagine a congregation just sitting there going, mom, 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 mom? I mean, come on. How inspiring is that? So this next part, this to me is extremely interesting. This is why are the hymns being revised? This is the most telling part to me. So it says the church has released an updated hymn book and other music collections every few decades. They have made some changes in the past. And senior church leaders have determined that the timing is right for an update to the 1985 hymn book. Do you guys remember when this came out? Had you joined the church yet? Maybe you hadn't, Bill.
I did. I remember.
Okay. Do you remember? Do you remember the hymn book prior to this?
Yeah. It was brown.
Yeah. It was like a reddish brown.
It was brown with the tabernacle embossed. Yep. And this was green with the tabernacle embossed.
Yep. Yep. And the key of all those songs in the old hymn book were horrible. 6 sharps, 5 flats. I was a primary pianist ever since I was 11. It was very hard to play. That was one of the reasons they updated it, is to make it just very universal, simplified music so that everybody could play it. And the children's book came out in 1989, and this is the update since then. So issues that are being resolved with the new collection include, so there are issues with the old books. I didn't realize that, but here are the issues that are going to be solved. Inconsistency in music offerings across languages spoken by members of the church. Okay, that makes sense. They want to update it. They want everybody have a stellar collection in whatever language they'd like to praise in. Doctrinal inaccuracies, culturally insensitive language, and limited cultural representation of the global church. Any thought about that? Doctrinal inaccuracies
I want
in
to
the hymns.
on a doctrinal inaccuracy in a hymn book that they changed or got rid of because of it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Wouldn't your bet be that at the time the hymn book was current in 1985, that those weren't doctrinal inaccuracies?
I
That's
have no
exactly
idea.
it.
We got rid of the one with Adam God in it, didn't we? We got rid of that a long time ago, I think.
Yeah.
Sons of Michael, hear him approaching or something.
Yep, there are all kinds of those examples. And then there are some very racially insensitive examples from much longer ago, which I won't go into, but you can
Are there
Google
really
those.
that are still in the hymn book, 1985?
No, well, no, not there. These would be some of the much older ones, or some of the older. I mean, when I was in primary, and this would be in the late 60s, there were like Halloween songs and fun songs. It wasn't all with a priesthood purpose or gospel orientation. So anyway, I think we'll come back to doctrinal inaccuracies. Another reason it's being revised is because licensing limitations for music publishing, particularly impacting digital use. So that makes sense. They just can't get the rights to some of the songs because I think a lot of us know, but maybe a lot of us don't. A lot of these tunes are, used in other countries. They're folk hymns. For example, what's the song that's Go Tell Aunt Rhody? Da, 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 da. Whichever one that is. Go Tell Aunt Rhody is a folk. Maybe nobody knows what I'm talking about.
Thinking about the old Grey Goose is Dead, but I don't know what the name of the song is.
Why can't I remember? What's the hymn? All I can remember is the folk hymn. That's funny.
I know Green's
Anyway. Oh, Lord, we thank thee. Lord, we thank thee for the... Boy, I'm losing it. All right, let's move on. Hymns that have fallen into disuse and can be retired to make way for other music that will be more valued. That makes sense. There are some hymns in the hymn book. When you're bored at church and you sit there kind of thumbing through the book and you're like, what's this? I've never sung this. I didn't even know this existed. So there are hymns that they really haven't sung for decades, unless you have one of those weird choristers that is like, we're going to sing all the songs that no one sings. We're going to learn, and nobody likes that. So they're getting rid of those hymns. No more chance.
Did they get rid of a bunch of hymns just because they were tired of members putting under the bed after the title?
It's possible. Yeah. There's nothing else to do in sacrament meeting but to play with the hymn book.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yep. No, I do know what you're talking about.
Bill?
I know, like with fortune cookies, you add in bed at the end of the fortune.
Yeah.
So you're like, praise to the man under the bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people do in bed, but the PG version is under the bed. That's what I did.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm more scandalous.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Here's a good one. Another reason for the new revision is unaddressed gospel principles in our current collection. Well, what gospel principles aren't covered in the hymn book? I don't know. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Moral agency.
Moral agency. I thought of a couple. I thought of covenant path. I'm guessing that there will be some songs because that's a relatively new term. And I'm thinking the rhyme there would be hath or something like that. Probably not bath, but anyway, we'll see what they do. Covenant path. I think ongoing restoration is going to be something that they're going to have to cover in one of the hymns because that's a newer concept. So yeah, I think if we really thought about it, there are quite a few things that have kind of slipped into the, yes, RFM.
If you take covenant path and rhyme it with the next line, which has something about taking a bath, I think you're on something.
What about temple spire height?
Is it too late to submit? I feel like maybe we should.
Yep. Taking a bath if you go along with that covenant path.
I like that. Why don't you release your own version of the hymn book, RFM? I think that would do really well. I like it. Okay. And the last reason is hymns that many members find are too difficult to sing or to play. And that makes sense. I know they're trying to move toward like things that can be accompanied by a guitar, for other countries that may not even have access to a keyboard. So I think that's very interesting. So, any more comments on why they've been changing steeple height? I love it, Landon. You're absolutely right. Low unto the steeple height. That I know that's coming. Yep, you're
I'm
absolutely
reminded about low bridge, low steeple, everybody down.
the
Yeah.
glow and low the glow of the steeple height as we see it at night. Yeah, I'm going to submit this. Okay, if we're done with this section, let's move
What was the
on.
most
And
difficult song you had to play as a primary chorus or primary pianist?
what?
What was the hardest song you had to play as
Oh.
a primary pianist?
Let me think. Every year, I don't know if you know this, at the primary program, they would introduce a new song not in the regular book. So it was a special song that was going to be that special number with a lot of punch, like Gethsemane, right? We'll talk about that later. That's one of the ones in the new book. So some of those were kind of hard, but I was an excellent sight reader. I was somebody that just kind of played my own thing. So the kids really liked me because I do those flourishes and the da-da-da-da-da, and I was always accused of playing too fast. So that was me as a primary pianist. Anyway, now we're going to actually talk about what actually are the new hymns. And I'm calling this section, All That Is Old Is New Again. And here's a picture of do you recognize, probably not this orange Sing With Me, RFM, were you two probably too old to
Oh, I saw it.
probably joined.
I saw it meandering about the hallways.
Yeah, exactly. That's the book that I learned. That's my first book as a primary pianist. That was the book when I was 11. And so these are examples of all kinds of other hymn books from the past.
I didn't say recently.
Yeah, well, I know. We're talking decades and decades ago. So, of course, you know me, I like to make my edgy Mormon content by making Trexmos, which is Star Trek memes with edgy Mormon content through the lens of Star Trek. So here we have somebody singing very fervently, his eye is on the sparrow. And the guy sitting in the back looking disgusted is like, dude, these new hymns have been in literally everybody else's hymnal for centuries. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at my own thing, but that is exactly what we're going to talk about.
I don't know why. I do all the time. His eye is on the sparrow. I read the next line to be when the going gets narrow.
Yeah, that's a good one. No, this is a beautiful folk hymn that's been around forever. And this is what I want to talk about. If you look at these titles, and we won't go through everything, these are all some centuries old Anglo-Protestant hymns. These are not new. These are ones that have been around forever. And when I showed the new songs to my mom, who was raised Protestant and then joined the church as a young adult, she said, "It's my old hymn book." It is her old hymn book. These are the songs that most Christian faiths have as staples. Oh, Come Thou Font. That was a big one that everybody was really, really excited about. His Eye is on the Sparrow. That's another one. These are standards. And the church has now decided to include these, just like we hear that Amazing Grace is going to be one of the ones that's going to make it into the hymn book. Again, they only released 13 songs this time around. And they're going to be, that's why I said trickling out. They're going to be releasing them as they go along. So what are your thoughts on the fact that we were told this hymn book is going to be, accessible to a global audience, it's going to reflect a global audience. And I'm not saying it won't in the future, but this batch seems to be heavily Anglo-Protestant and just some tried and true old favorites.
Well, all I want to know is, did Book of Mormon, Follow the Prophet, did it make it?
We don't know yet. We have no idea. So these are the more adult songs. And then we will move on to the children's songs. And if you look at this list here, there is nothing that is a new submission from anyone. These are songs that have been sung around out there. Maybe they were a special number like Gethsemane for a primary program. But if you look at the dates, all of 2011, 2019, these are songs that have been circling around. We have not yet seen the new submissions. So, but there are some, there's one that it's kind of stuck in my head because I've been listening to it, and it's called something like, let me see, The Savior Comes Again. I think it's called When the Savior Comes Again. It has a pretty tune, and it's definitely got sort of a millennial feel to it because it talks about Jesus coming again, which is why I have this graphic here. And the first line is, when the Savior comes again, first he'll cleanse the earth, and then all this beautiful stuff that they go on. But I'm like, wait, back up. What do you mean he'll cleanse the earth again? Let's talk about that part. They just kind of gloss over that, right? Because we know what happens when he cleanses the earth, but they're not going to put that in an actual verse. So anyway, a lot of really beautiful children's songs, and 13 of them. and they're on the church's website. Anybody can check them out. You can play them. And here's my last question as we end this section. I found this on social media. Somebody was questioning, what it says the church's website says that part of their hymn book revisions now will include changes to resolve the doctrinal inaccuracies. Any guesses to what the problematic songs will be? This person suggested Mother in Heaven, which exists in Oh My Father. Might that be sort of taken out? And we kind of touched on it before, but do you have any last thoughts at the close of anything that they might have to get rid of? I've heard anecdotally that Praise to the Man is on the chopping block and hotly contested in the committees. Like some people are saying we've got to keep that. Other people are saying that just has to go. So it's interesting to think of the process.
I don't know about which doctrines are going to be taken out. I do think it's more important when this whole project's done to review what hymns were taken out. I think that will tell a bigger story than the ones that have been added in.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what I thought. After the fact, we can look back and maybe it'll be a newscast story. And should we pencil it in for 2030? I think we should.
It's a little ways away, huh?
It's a little. I have a calendar up to 2030. What don't you guys? What's wrong with you?
I don't have a calendar to next month.
That's probably a better way to live.
Banana.
All right. I think I'm done with the hymns. I think it was just very interesting that they finally came out. We've really been waiting and people are really, really excited just to have something else to chew on. You know what I mean? Something else, finally, something new. And I admit, I listened to every single one and some of them I find myself humming them through the day because they're new. They're different. They're replacing those other hymns that we've had on autoplay since, the late 60s.
Wow. Oh, that's right. I'm in charge.
Yeah, you're in charge. Take it away. What's the next segment?
The next segment is I'm hoping that at least one veggie tail
me again.
The hymn book.
I can jump in if you want me to, Rebecca, and then we can come back.
Why don't we do that? Because people are probably tired of hearing me. Why don't you take your section and then we'll end up with temples.
Yeah, let's do that. So really quick, I won't share the specific data. There were two things that happened in the past week or so on the Salt Lake Tribune. They came out with their Mormon Land podcast, LDS Church growth amid the good news. There are areas of concern. And then they essentially put the podcast into an article, and that's Mormon Land, the surprising news about LDS Church growth. A little bit different, but sort of the same thing. And then they interviewed the website expert. I don't remember what his name is. I think his first name's Matt. Growth of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints but it's ldschurchgrowth.blogspot.com. We've used it numerous times in various places, sort of trying to figure out whether the church is growing, whether it isn't, and where that's happening at and where it's not. And I just want to go over some of the data that they shared. Church-wide growth rate, annual membership growth in the last general conference when they released the membership numbers 2 months ago. The annual membership increased 1.5%. It's the largest since the 2020 pandemic. New converts were the highest since 2015. Children of Record was the highest it had been since the last few years. He didn't give a year in the podcast audio, and I didn't see a year in the article either, but new Children of Record are up compared to the last few years. And then people taken off the rolls has gone down. So assumedly, there are less people dying, less Children of Record not getting baptized, less excommunicated people, and less resignations. Although mathematically, that's not necessarily true. Any of those could be actually an increase, but the collective number shows that there is something less there going on. So, for instance, less people could die, but you could still have more Children of Record not getting baptized. But as long as there's less people dying is the greater number, the negative, you end up with still less. But anyway, that total of those four categories, less is happening, which is sort of a sign to those of us who sort of look at these things that maybe the changing of rhetoric around excommunication and disfellowship has actually caused less leadership disciplinary councils because they're softer words. Maybe leaders feel more of a need to be softer in their approach. I think that is at least worth considering. Maybe we've hit a moment where less people are resigning, and as people live longer and longer, maybe a few less people are dying too. And so anyway, there's all of that. Congregation growth. This one I thought was maybe more telling because the church doesn't tell us about activity rates and that growing number of 17 million members or 18 million or whatever it's at now, it doesn't really count, because whenever governments or other folks go in and do the research and ask people how they self-label themselves religiously, the people that the church counts as being Mormon, those people in significant numbers don't report themselves as Mormon. And so the church essentially counts anybody who's been baptized their entire life. Meanwhile, many of those people have moved on religiously to something else, or to non-belief or some sort of spirituality, and they don't attribute themselves as Mormons, even though the church still counts them. So what seemed like a greater indicator of activity rates in the church is the increase in congregations, the building of new buildings, the new branches, new wards organized, or new stakes organized. And the LDS Growth Blogspot website said that the net increase in congregations is quite low, 0.51%. So not even just barely over 0.5%. So this might be our best indicator. Then just to note, the church is growing furiously in Africa. East Africa, all over East Africa, is experiencing unprecedented growth. The church, again, 1.5% growth rate, and a really good area is considered like 5%. Mozambique, by the way, RFM, this is where our president and prophet, seer and revelator, Russell M. Nelson, at gunpoint, had to deal with people who came to rob him and take his life. And because of all the tender mercies of our Father in heaven, he was able to live through that experience.
The incident in Mozambique, I remember it well. Bruce Lee's got nothing on President Nelson.
No. So maybe there's no coincidence that Mozambique, for example, is growing substantially at around a 34% growth rate. 2 new stakes, meaning high quality growth. So let me just say, the numbers there to begin on the front end of this 34% growth are really small. LDS Growth Blogspot noted that when an area gets to be about 10,000 or 20,000 members, that growth rate comes down considerably. But they are talking about, and I'll get to this in a moment, they're talking about areas in Africa where there are significant numbers of people to be taught the gospel, 20 million people in some of these countries in Africa. And so there's a big potential pool of investigators that could be introduced to the gospel and have a chance to join the church. And so the church is really making a very big effort in the continent of Africa. Mozambique, 34% growth rate, 2 new stakes. They pointed to, this shows that people are really sort of loyal to the church there, that they're having an easier time retaining quality members who can be leaders, and hence wards and stakes are popping up. In West Africa.
Can I have one
Please.
question? Do you know much about the growth rate in other Christian churches that have a missionary effort there? Because I've read that it's booming for everyone.
It is booming for everyone. And they did mention other high demand fundamentalist religions, and they specifically named the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists.
That's what I'd heard. Yeah.
Yep. And those guys already sort of had a head start and were already significantly larger. I can't remember what the data point was that they shared. Those 2 faiths each have more congregations than the LDS Church has members. So there's a lot of room for getting the people in Africa to switch sides. And I don't want to make a fence reference because of the priesthood ban, but I was sort of thinking, like, to get them to sort of switch sides or jump the fence to the other thing. West Africa slowed down a bit, though. They used to be at 10 to 20% growth rate. Now they're down to 5 or 10. So again, once the numbers get to a certain level, they start to really come down quite a bit. I just want to note, Africa is where the church is both experiencing the most growth, the highest growth rate, as well as the largest future potential growth. The church is putting a lot of eggs into the Africa basket. And it reminds me of the President Nelson standing before the people of Africa and saying this quote, "We preach tithing to the poor people of the world because the poor people of the world have had cycles of poverty, generation after generation. That same poverty continues from one generation to another until people pay their tithing." And you can start to see the game plan. You start to get these people to feel like tithing is a big deal. And then you're also spending a lot of time, energy, and resources in the growth in that continent. And I think what they're sort of admitting is they know that in all of the developed areas, things are starting to come down and plateau. And they've got to figure out in the areas where there's high growth, but maybe the general income level's not quite as high, they got to figure out how to replace some of these lost tithing dollars from members. And I think manipulating people in Africa to think that they will be able to get out of poverty simply by paying tithing. Again, I don't know any science, and I'm just going to go with science. I don't know of any science that says that you spend more money out of your pocket that goes to something that does you no benefit in mortality, and you end up with the blessing of having more money in the end. I'm not the best at math, but I don't think that quite adds up.
It's just prosperity gospel. That's all it is.
It is, and it's a manipulation.
Just a wish. It's buying a lottery ticket. It's buying a tier of Mother Mary. It's prosperity gospel.
Rebecca, I have a question for you. Is Growling Alice there with you?
She's snoring. I'm really sorry if you guys are hearing this, but
I was wondering what Growling Alice thinks of President Nelson's comment about tithing. Can you get her on the microphone?
Oh, she's just asleep now.
Oh.
Is that what you think about President Nelson, Growling Alice?
That looks like, that's paws down. That's 2 paws down.
Yeah.
3 paws.
Woo. Yeah. She's a little testy right there. So yeah, she's kind of our barometer right there.
The gurometer? Is that what you said?
Oh my God. Oh, that's terrible. I'm making a meme.
I just want to know, I think we all have been given a stereotype about people in Africa, and sort of the image on the screen is sort of what, if we just drop down in a parachute to a random place in Africa, this is what we would run into. Well, that and maybe some lions. But I just want to note that the reality is this is a developing country, and in some places, I think, highly developed country. And I've got a good friend that I've just made in the last month, and she is originally from Africa. She came to the U.S. About 10 years ago, got her bachelor's degree, I think, in Africa, got a master's degree, and is working on her doctorate here in the United States. And as I had a conversation with her about Africa versus like what I think of what Africa is and how the people are living versus what it really is, she pointed to this is what it is. It's in lots of areas, it is a developed country that has less crime, less of the things that we sort of worry about, the kind of the dark stuff that goes on in our country. She said that she worried a lot less about her safety. And these were 4 pictures from various cities in Africa. I just want to note that the church isn't wrong to see the potential there. I think there's something going on where the church is shifting its focus to other places outside the United States.
I think it's called natural resources.
Yeah, well, that's true too. And there's certainly lots of land to buy, isn't there?
And lots of resources in that land.
Yeah. And then I just want to note here, 36 new missions, with 9 of those being in Africa. So new LDS missions in Africa. So certainly a missionary presence and a huge focus there. And then just other places. Spain has the highest growth rate in 20 years. They mentioned that. The Philippines has a 2 to 3% activity rate increase. That's an increase that has apparently grown there more successfully. So the Philippines seems to be doing well. Spain is doing great in 2 different ways. But it's kind of cool. I got the picture of Africa. I meant to take that off and put a picture of Spain and the Philippines. So folks, if you're not really good at geography, that is not the Philippines. That is not Spain. But there is that. And so that's all I've got. Just as much as I sort of expect the church to start declining, and I think it is in England and the United States and other highly developed places, I think we all sort of also have to recognize that the church is growing in other places and may have a really large potential pool for that development. And it might be interesting to see how much it grows in those places in the next couple of decades.
Yes, it might indeed. I've got to tell you that once a week, when I was on my mission in Japan, I know you didn't go on a mission, did you, Bill?
Mm-mm.
No, Rebecca? For all of you out there who went on a mission with me, and I'm not talking to the first presidency either, apparently, but for all of those who went out there, you may recall that once a week you had to sit down and you had to come up with your stats for the week, whether that was how many contacts, how many first discussions taught, how many second discussions taught, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to, when you're going through these stats, especially the ones that are favorable to the church, Bill, I have to always remind myself of the creative writing that was invoked, not just by me, but by almost all the missionaries when it came time to creating our reports. And the worse our statistics actually were, the better the statistics ended up being on the weekly report. And I just have to remember, this is where they're culling all this information from. They're going all the way down to the missionaries for at least the convert baptisms. And that's what we're depending on. Maybe they're all being honest, and maybe this is true. I sure hope so, because nobody wants to see this church grow more than I do. But
They did raise the bar.
Yes, they did. And I'm just a little skeptical is all.
Yeah.
I have a question about the topic. I was talking to my co-host Landon about this, and I had heard anecdotally from missionaries that have returned and their parents talk to me that, socially, polygamy is practiced in a lot of these areas, the Muslim faith.
Mhm.
It's an issue. What do you do about that? How do you approach a family that the complete norm is to live in polygamy, completely normal? And then how do you discuss becoming LDS? What do you do with that? I mean, it seems like that might be problematic. And I don't know how widespread that is, but anecdotally, I've heard that they're running into this issue. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, because it has been an issue before for the church, even in the 20th century over in, I think it was in Africa as well, and having this problem, it might have been the Middle East, having the problem of teaching the gospel to a family where the man is a practicing polygamist and he's got his multiple wives there who are accepting the gospel too. My recollection is the story on that was, well, he had to divorce all of his wives except for the one. And I guess the one was his decision. I don't know if they made him pick any one or other, but the other ones had to go fend for themselves. So that's my recollection. Of what
Wow.
happened.
How happy.
That's harsh.
Well, you
That's
can't be
really harsh.
an apostate and get baptized into the church.
Yeah. I feel bad for those women. That certainly seems like a negative outcome for them, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Something to think about and
Better
look
that
at going
one
forward. Who
man-
knows?
Better that one man should perish than 12 women dwindle in unbelief, I guess.
There are frequently unseen costs in
Yeah.
liberating people.
Yeah. That's something. All right. Are we ready to close out with our temple update?
Now you're going to bring the fire.
Oh dear. I don't know. I'm a little tired. We did a podcast on this. We got all this information in real time yesterday afternoon and evening and put out a podcast like at midnight. It was kind of crazy. So I'm a little tired today, but it wouldn't be the newscast without some mention of temples. I feel like we do it every time. So this is your slide, RFM. I don't know if you recognize this from the last president. I kind of stole it and I added another picture to it because you did such a good job of listing it so clearly. We're going to talk about McKinney, Texas Temple, which is being built in the town of Fairview, even though it's named McKinney. And these are just some real-time updates from yesterday that I thought everybody would be interested in. It's 43,000 square feet. It has a 173-foot tall spire, and it was announced in October of 2022. And the church is there now engaging with the government of the city government of Fairview, trying to get this temple approved. Of course, it's being built in a residential neighborhood where the variances and the zoning call for a 35-foot high roof line. This is quite larger than that, so they are trying to have exceptions. It went before the Planning Commission just a few weeks ago, and the Planning Commission recommended against approving it as it stands. It's the first time I've ever seen that in all the cities that I cover it. Most of the cities say, okay, you got us, we'll do it. Texas said, no, don't mess with Texas. So let's talk about what happened yesterday really quickly here. So I went to the Pride Parade. It was really fun. I spent all day out in the sun in Salt Lake, saw a lot of viewers that came up and said hi, a lot of people. It was really fun. I was not thinking about anything to do with temples because I was at a Pride Parade and I wasn't even thinking about my email or anything. So I came home and logged on probably about 7:00 last night. And there were probably like 10 emails from people all over Texas area, other areas saying there's been a huge email campaign today. And yesterday was Sunday. So these are letters that are read from the pulpit. These are emails that are sent around to stakes. I had somebody from Idaho contact me and said she had received this email. The emails, basically what I wrote here, emails and posts also on social media, flood the earth. 15,000 faithful emails are needed in 24 hours. And also wear white shirts this time. So that kind of alludes to what was in the emails. So I won't read this whole letter. There were many different versions of this letter that went everywhere. I am not kidding. And posts on social media, you had some missionaries pick up on this in other states, send it out. They're basically saying we need 15,000 emails to be sent to the City Council of Fairview to tell them how we feel about the temple, how important it is that the temple is built. And we need these emails by, I think, right now or this afternoon. It was a very small window. It was like a 24-hour window. So this call went out everywhere. I saw Faithful Mormon influencers put this call out. Everybody was soliciting these 15,000 emails. One of the more, to me, disturbing things I saw is a call for the youth to make sure and write emails. And I don't know how young of a youth, but they said all the youth were invited to also weigh in. So I'm picturing parents or young men, young women leaders saying, let's write our emails. I was also told anecdotally from one stake that they had set aside time, second hour, for people to be able to write these emails. So just a huge push everywhere. And again, the emails are to the city council tomorrow night. There is a town council is what they call it in McKinney, a town council meeting where they will decide to approve this application for height variance from the church or to deny it. So the emails need to get in to influence the city council, the town council. Now, what I've heard anecdotally from residents is that Fairview does not entertain anything that isn't from someone in Fairview. So while this is a great effort, and I don't know yet if they achieved it or not, the 15,000, it seems like the only ones that they're really going to listen to are people who actually live in Fairview, not 15,000. So that was the push on all these posts and all these emails. You really can't believe what a flood it was, and from all over the place, so far away from Texas, not at all involved there in the area. The other thing that they ask in this email and the different variations that went around is to please, and this will sound familiar like Lone Mountain, please come to the meeting. Please, if you can, physically attend the meeting. And if you remember in Lone Mountain, what color shirt were they supposed to wear? You remember? The blue. That's right. In this case, you're supposed to wear white. I feel like these are cougar colors. Or I feel like maybe these are standard colors that everybody has. Like if you were to say wear fuchsia, I don't think maybe a lot of the men would have that color to wear. So they're supposed to show up. They're supposed to wear white shirts. They were told that they probably will not be able to get into the meeting. Now, I know that Fairview did rent a larger venue because they anticipated this kind of crowd. But the members were told to bring lawn chairs and water and umbrellas, practice self-care when you're here because it might be hot outside while you're waiting. So this was very interesting. Just, the show of support, they talked about making a visual statement, same as Lone Mountain. You want those photo ops where you can see a sea of white shirts showing that you are in support of the proposed temple. So that was really interesting to access last night. Any thoughts on that before we go forward?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there was any other efforts made to influence the city council / town council, but I know that's what you're heading toward.
I don't know. In every city that we study, there are different things going on. But yeah, certainly people, and I will say a lot of these were sent by attending members, faithful members who just said, you might want to be aware of what's happening here. I feel like a tide is sort of shifting a little bit, and even faithful members are going, this is too much. This is our town. This is where we live. We don't know what to say to neighbors.
I know. I was putting myself in their position.
Yeah.
At one point today, thinking about the show and thinking, you guys, you leaders of my church, you waltz in, you piss everybody off, and you waltz out, but I got to live here.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly the sentiment, especially in Cody right now. That's a big one. They're waiting on their final ruling sometime this week. But yeah, the relationships in the town are in great disarray. I will say that. So, all right.
Well, that's something to say, I think.
Yes.
My only thing I was going to add was in the very first story we covered about this sort of stuff going on was in Vegas, and there were chunks of money deposited in the district council members' district, right?
Yeah, from the church's law firm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if we've heard anything. I'm sure I wouldn't put it past the church that they're doing this on all, if not most of these occasions.
Yeah.
Are we hearing any word of money being
I
put
haven't
into
heard
district
anything about
accounts?
money, and I know that the residents groups have looked into that because these are all public records,
Yeah.
and you definitely want to see how there might be some pressure or influence or favor. So I know they're on top of this. These people are really smart in what they're doing, and they are
Yeah.
looking at this. So the next thing that happened all last night is that I was given access to this letter from a faithful person, and it's a letter inviting leadership in the area. So we're talking state presidents, bishops, Relief Society presidents, anybody in leadership to come to a special meeting at which Curtin McConkie lawyers would be in attendance, an area rep would be in attendance, and also a local PR church rep, somebody that had sent out letters and things like that before. So this meeting was originally, if you read it, they're supposed to happen on Tuesday. The town council meeting was moved back, so now they need to have it quickly on Sunday night. So this meeting is happening in real time on Sunday night, last night, as leaders in the stake are getting instruction on how to prepare for this meeting coming up, what will be tomorrow night. Suddenly, I began getting information from people in that meeting, people that were there, people in leadership started to send me. I'm just sitting at my couch going, what is happening? And of course, they are paraphrasing some of the things that they're hearing there from the Curtin McConkie lawyers and the area rep and the PR person. So again, this is not word for word. This is not a transcript. These are notes and observations that people that were at the meeting shared with me. So again, sort of just an opinion. You can take this for what it is, just paraphrase from people at the meeting. And of course, a few pictures were sent to me, which I, for privacy, I don't want to, out anybody or anything like that. So one thing that was said, or a concept that was shared by the Area 70 to the group of leaders there, was only the Church of Jesus Christ has the answers to all the world's problems, and those answers are found in the temple. So any thoughts on that concept? They were talking about that.
I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. Every problem that I've ever had in my life, all I had to do was go to the temple and listen to the endowment for the 500th time, and the answer came just like that.
Well, there you go. There's an endorsement. Yeah, I'm not even saying that's not a true statement. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that.
You have nothing to add.
He's
Bill's
right.
like, I'm just
Everyone goes to the temple trying to figure out what's being taught there, and we're all guessing at the symbolism. Oh, well, I think this might mean this, and no, sorry,
I don't know. All right. Then, as I said, the Curtin McConkie attorneys had come in. And so this is something that someone at that meeting paraphrased for me. Again, I just want to keep stating these are paraphrased statements of concepts that are shared at the meeting. Nothing will bless the saints more than a temple here in Fairview. Lots of changes are going on behind the scenes, even in the last few weeks. The church is starting to pivot. Didn't really explain what that was. We'll turn up the heat if we need to, but we don't want to do it more than we need to. So I don't know, you're an attorney, RFM. What does that kind of statement mean to leadership there in this meeting last night?
RFM
means we don't want to have to F you up, but we'll F you up as much as you make us F you up, and then we'll stop Fing you up. By the way, I just want to future reference the place where I think it's where Peter exchanges the token and the password to prove that he's a true disciple of Jesus Christ. One time when I went through that and I had a question on my mind, what that meant Burger King over McDonald's.
That was your question, your burning question for the temple, where you would eat afterwards?
Every problem I've ever had, I go and listen to the endowment for the 500th time, and the answer comes.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. All right. So the attorney is just kind of given the game plan a little bit. And I will say that the people that were contacting me, they were definitely people with questions as leadership, kind of what I just mentioned before. What do I tell people? People are asking me things. People in my ward, my neighbors. What do I share with people? And so this meeting, our attorneys and area rep and PR trying to tell them and share with them, what they can tell their neighbors and congregations. So another attorney, or maybe the same attorney, I don't know, they just said it was an attorney, said something along the lines of, if the city decides to play along, this will be a short game. If not, it will be a long game. But rest assured, we will win, and there will be a wonderful temple in your midst before long. So just reassuring the leadership that it might get sticky, it might get dicey, And I've seen this in Cody and Heber and, Lone Mountain, but in the end, we will be victorious. Any thoughts on that statement?
I feel like the only way these cities, because take any one city, the church has enough money that it can
Yeah.
make that local government and the funds that they have available, which is limited, they can make them pay the price. But if every city said, F you, we're going to fight you to the death, the church would have to realize that it's not going to be able to do that over and over and over again. And I think it's the only way that these cities win is if they all decide together that from here on out, every one of us will fight you.
Yep. And it's a question of PR. If there are enough cities that you just sort of hear, wow, 30 cities are in this situation, with this organization, what is going on? It's that negative PR that might make a difference, I think, and just make them rethink.
It's the kind that Scientology gets. And I don't think it works well for them.
Yep. That's exactly the thought. Any thoughts on that, RFM, or shall we move forward?
I think that if I were the church, I would want to be going into new places and trying to make a good impression on the new neighbors, since it's their neighborhood and I'm coming in. Or if I'm just trying to think of it in a utilitarian kind of basic cost benefit analysis, I think it would benefit the church to have the people in the neighborhood where they're sticking their temple to think kindly of the Mormons and not think that they just come in and throw their weight around and they don't care what the members of the neighborhood think, and they're just going to come in and steamroll them with their lawyers from Salt Lake City. That's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, it's not a good look. And I feel like in the past, I've said this before, that the church actually used to take pride in the Hinckley era of working with towns, working with places, putting temples. I think we mentioned this last time. And it seems like it's very different now. I don't know if because there is this push for more temples, you've just got to get it in, got to get it done. But yeah, it does seem to be more of a my way or the highway, which leaves all this collateral damage in its wake in these towns with these residents and these members. And I will say, I feel, of course, I'm talking to the residents who are trying to get the temple to be built in a more appropriate place, but I also really feel for the membership. I feel like they're sort of being used in all of these towns. I feel like I would be upset if I had family members in any of these towns who are being made to send emails and show up in blue and white shirts, not exactly knowing what they were defending or why, almost put in an impossible situation. So I have great empathy for the membership that's just trying to do what is right, just trying to follow their faith. But the situation they're being put in by the institutional church, I don't think it's fair. So I feel really bad for them.
Especially when the spire height doesn't matter.
But they're being told to say it. They're literally being told to tell an untruth. And we've seen this over and over. And now, as we'll see going forward, it's not just the spire. It's not just the light. It's now the walls. The walls are very important. They keep adding things to the unending doctrine of just the makeup of the building. So anyway, we could go on all night. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Here's another Curtin McConkie attorney. And this is where they start to talk to them about how to address people at the council meeting tomorrow night. Now, this is live streamed. If anybody would like to watch this, I'm going to put the link to this meeting on our Newscast Facebook page. I'll also add it to the show notes. This is fascinating. RFM and I remotely watched the last one. We thought, we'll just look at it. We stayed up till way past midnight. You cannot look away. Maybe not midnight, but it was late. It was 5 hours. So here the attorneys are trying to tell people how they need to address the council when they're talking to them. Try and take a certain piece.
Supposed to do?
Do
you assume this pose before talking to the city council?
Yeah, well, this is because, and I saw this at Lone Mountain, they had only gotten the information about how important the steeple height was maybe weeks earlier. And I saw people with tears in their eyes addressing the council about the steeple height. It meant so much to them. They had just heard about it a few weeks earlier. But, and again, I'm not even trying to be facetious. When you have to gaslight yourself to be able to present something that the church that you care about is telling you is real, this is what you have to do to yourself. And so that's why I'm angry for the residents. So this attorney has said, try and take a certain piece of the temple structure, the spire or the height of the walls, and make it part of your testimony Tuesday night at the city council meeting. Don't just bear your testimony of the temple, but specifically the spire of the temple or the height of the temple or I guess I repeated that twice, the height of the temple. And again, RFM, do you want to explain why they have to mention these heights? This is more of a legal scenario.
Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to capitalize on this federal law that got passed some 30 years or so ago when the Boston, Massachusetts temple was going up, which was built complete without the steeple first. And then after this law passed, they went back and they added the steeple. What the law says is basically, if a church or religious building or educational building, that's the other part of the Arlupa, but if a religious building, regardless of the religion, is coming into a neighborhood or any kind of zoned area, which is pretty much always going to be in some kind of zoned area, the zoning laws don't really apply to that temple or to that church or that synagogue or whatever it is, mosque, as long as the church claims that the architectural feature in question is part of their religious practice or worship.
Yeah, they literally can't worship without it, is what they need to prove. And they tried this in Cody, and about a year ago, Cody said, well, show me in any of your doctrine where it talks about the height. There was nothing they could show. So the law is actually in place. It was introduced by Utah senators, as RFM said, after the Boston debacle where neighbors fought the steeple, to, stop discrimination. Like if a mosque comes into a town and the city council says, not in my neighborhood, and they shut it down, this law would protect them. It's supposed to be a shield. In this case, the church is using it as a sword to kind of beat down these towns and say, you will let me in at whatever height my temple is because I must have that to worship. And that's why it's very important to introduce this idea into talks, into testimonies to meetings, that it's absolutely essential that we have height, giant walls, light, all of this. We cannot worship without it, is what they need to prove.
Mm.
Yep, very interesting. So, okay, this is the part that I thought was just so interesting. They let everybody know at the meeting that coaching would be available tonight after the meeting. And of course, in my mind, I don't know, I have a strange sense of humor, but I just thought of Rocky. I just thought of something like, did you tell him about the steeple, Rocky? Did you mention the walls? Like somebody's just really pumping him up to get out there, letting them know what they need to say to be effective, the words they need to hear. What do you guys think about coaching? And it was only for Fairview residents. That was it. Nobody else.
You're going to eat lightning and crap thunder, Rock.
That's what I'm saying.
About coaching.
Bill's just shaking his head. No comment. Just a head shake.
The moment you admit you're coaching, you're manipulating. It's just dishonest and deceitful.
I know. And again, these are just people attending the meeting. They gave me this information. This is in their words. So I'm putting that disclaimer on everything.
And they don't want to have the debacle they've had in prior meetings where people get up there and just run the testimony treadmill into the ground.
Yes.
And the people making the decisions are going, would you please stop already? Yeah. We've heard a million of these. Knock it off.
Yep. And that is very true. A lot of the members just get up one after the other and do bear their testimony about the temple. In fact, in the McKinney Planning Commission meeting, finally, the area rep stood up and said, I think we've heard enough from the LDS members. He literally said that because he could read the room, right? It was not going well. The Planning Commission was saying,
listen to what they're saying. They're saying, stop it. If you tell us something about the height, the dimensions, something that
the zones, the codes.
Building.
Yep, exactly. So having learned from that, they are now instructing people what they need to say to be relevant at the meeting. A testimony is not just going to cut it at all. And boy, you should go back and watch that meeting. It was pretty amazing. All right.
Situation, as I understand it, Rebecca, and you correct me if I'm wrong, where we all know what they're doing. And I think the city council pretty much knows what they're all doing, and our audience knows what they're all doing. But do the members know what they're doing? Is it true? All the members know is that they're being asked to weigh in on this. And for some strange reason, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is unexplained to them by anybody. Yep. They're supposed to start putting in these comments about how important the height of the steeple is and how high the walls are. But nobody says why, because if they did, then they would know that they're being asked to lie.
100%. And that is something that came up at this meeting, as it was explained to me that some of these leaders were actually asking that questions. They said things like, my neighbors have come to me with really good questions. Why are we saying this? So again, I'm saying all these are good, wonderful people, and they're just put in this impossible situation, and I think some of them are now just starting to feel, can I say, icky about it? Honestly, it reminds me of when I was still attending, and I've told this story before, and I'm sitting in Relief Society, and they come in and they say, hey, Prop 8, we're going to charter a bus and we're all going to go down there and we're going to canvass. They're also threatening to attack the temple. We're going to go and kind of block the road. They actually said lay in the road to protect the temple and to support, Prop 8. And I just remember kind of laughing until I looked around and saw that everybody there was signing up, like really excited. And it was one of those moments where I felt icky because I didn't want to do that at all. Everyone around me seemed really excited to do it. And it made me kind of realize there's a difference between how I feel and some of these other people. So I think we're starting to see this with some of the members. So another thing that was said by an attorney is that the architects used the height to inspire, to draw our eyes heavenward. That's why our temples must be so tall. The highest form of worship happens in the temple, so it must be done in a large building. Again, paraphrased from people that were there. So they're just prepping people to understand that it has to happen in a tall, huge, high building, lit with walls, highest spire ever. I find that very interesting because a few days ago, I came across this. Bill, would you like to play this? This is our wonderful Elder Bednar talking about I think it was the Guam temple. And he made a wonderful video discussing that particular temple.
I hear people, oh, that's a small temple. There's no such thing as a small temple. They're just temples. There's no such thing as small covenants or small ordinances. And see, that to me reflects this fixation on it's the building. Who cares what the size is if you have access to the same covenants and ordinances whereby we have a covenant connection with the Father and the Son? The mechanics of what takes place in the temple is not what matters. It's why we do what we do in the temple, which always goes back to the Father's plan and the Savior's.
I got to imagine that's going to come up in a courtroom if it needs to, right?
Yep. Any thoughts on that? To me, that's very, very impactful. And I actually will say that is how I've always been raised to think of temples, that it wasn't about the building. It was about the people and the covenants and what happened inside. So any thoughts about that, which seems to be completely opposite? This was only last year when this video came out. And this, of course, is a senior ranking member of the Quorum of the 12.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just put a picture up this small temple. I mean, some of them are
There it
tiny.
is. See?
It's a smoking gun. That is a smoking gun statement that Elder Bednar just gifted to all the people who are in opposition to these temples that have such high spires that they're violating the zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elder Bednar.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just say, let's just hear from one of their leaders about how important the size of the temple is. And, I rest my case, Your Honor. I feel like it's pretty much been done.
And by the way, this other member who came up before you, I don't know if you remember him, but we have his tape to play too, who said the first time he ever heard about anything about the spires being tall, that being anything about a temple, was in the past week when he was told to come in with everybody else to talk about it. He exposed it. And this statement from Elder Bednar just proves that it's exposed. The church is just trying to play the game. And I wish that playing the game for the church didn't include lying.
I know.
But more and more often, that seems to be a tool they reach for without even thinking about it. We will lie. We will have our members lie.
Yeah.
We, as leaders of the church, care so much about our members. And that's sarcasm, by the way. We care so little about our members and so much about a temple and the height of the spire that we will tell them to go in and violate the covenants that they have made in that temple, to be honest. And I think that is despicable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much to stay on the covenant path. I guess only when it's helpful. President Nelson?
RFM said it. All right. This was absolutely fascinating. And I want to get your guys' take on this. This was presented on the big screen at this meeting. And this is the results of petitions and email campaigns. I was on Nemo's show a while ago, and we talked about how in the various wards, some of them actually called someone to be in charge of making sure the petitions got out and set up a petition signing station within the ward to sign, or the stake centers to sign on Sundays. So there's definitely a drive to get signatures and petitions. So it's kind of blurry. It's kind of hard to see. But on the written petition, there are 5,800 adults in the Allen, McKinney, and Plano, Texas area. 2,667 have signed the paper petition. How many of those actually reside in Fairview? 71. Very interesting. Of the online petition, and again, they encourage people to sign online and on paper, 4,806 have signed the online petition. And of those, 31 Fairview residents signed. So the majority of these signatures, and again, they could be in the Temple district. There is such thing as a Temple district that isn't in the town. 4,500 emails were sent to the Fairview Council, and 44 are from residents. Now, there's something that really struck me about this. Can anybody guess what this is?
Probably the specific numbers.
They know the numbers. They know who sent an email. They know who signed a petition. And I'm guessing that they're putting pressure on leadership to get the rest of the people to sign. Isn't it interesting? They absolutely know down to the 4,806 signed. I mean, they know these numbers. That just floored me.
I'm going to guess that whoever's in charge of that, of course, the church is the one circulating the petition, so they have possession of it.
Right.
And the people in charge of it look at it, and they probably just went through it and counted the number with Fairview as a home address. I'm guessing to come up with a name of number of people and adults, Fairview, and that's one. Does that make sense?
Probably. I mean, they're wonderful at keeping stats, not sharing them. In this case, they did share them to leadership because I think they need to, boost the numbers.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. No, they want everybody to know that that Santa Claus is he's making a list.
Yeah.
And he's checking it twice. And he's going to find out who's naughty or nice. And he's going to know that there's only so many people who have signed this who are adult members in Fairview. And obviously everybody else who's an adult in Fairview who hasn't signed it needs to sign up now.
Seems like not that many people really care about the church's position within the geographic location of those who have influence on the decision.
Right. And I feel there may not be that many, just in Fairview proper. There may not be that number of members. So I don't know. And again, these petitions, I think you had to be 18 and over to sign. The emails and those kinds of things, you could be a youth. And I said they did promote that. So very interesting, I thought. And they showed this graphic. Then they had created another petition. They showed a barcode that everybody could access and share with members and people to, just show the overwhelming support.
Well, imagine if you are the members of the church, the leaders who are in charge of this, right? And you have 3 different methods. You basically got 15,000 members of the church signing off on this thing in support of the temple. And less than 150 of them are adult Mormons who live in Fairview.
I wonder how many of these umpteen thousand have had proxy work done for them.
I don't know. It's a good question. I was trying to figure out what percentage that is because I think it's 1%.
I think you might be right. Well, and I did
find it.
Yeah. I did hear from some of the residents there that they don't believe that the town council will consider anything except for somebody from Fairview. Like they're not going to read the email sent from Idaho, the woman that contacted me and said they read this in my ward. They're not going to have those emails from Idaho have any weight in their decision in Fairview.
Right.
That seems reasonable.
They only care about the voters.
Yeah. But it's definitely a battle cry. I think the active Latter-day Saint have this sense we're being persecuted. Here's my chance to fight. It's something we've been missing. We don't always have that opportunity. So anyway, I think you
think the church gets a little too clever because what this is telling anybody on the city council, it's revealing exactly what the church is doing because we're getting all of these signatures and things from Idaho, from Texas. Maybe you can't tell from the email, but if you have to put in a place where you live, and usually you do for a signature on a petition to have any validity to it. I mean, it's obvious what the church is doing. They're calling out the guard and they're saying, everybody, wherever you live, write letters to this place I'm sorry, is this Texas?
Yeah, this is Fairview, Texas, the
Okay,
McKinney Temple. It's named for the other town, the
all these,
town with the mayor that wrote the letter.
yeah, all these people from Utah then are writing in, and they're going,
Yeah.
why are all these people writing us?
Yeah.
Oh, gee, of course, that's what they did. They put up the bat signal, said everybody write letters.
Yeah. And if anything, it should make everyone take note. Look how they can mobilize. Look at this. You know what I mean? They're revealing it. It's very interesting. Okay, I think I have one more slide, maybe two. Okay. This was another very interesting takeaway from the meeting. Again, people that are just in attendance that are paraphrasing. Back to what RFM was talking about. Why is RLUIPA, the Religious Land and Use and Incarcerated Person Act, the one that doesn't allow a town to discriminate against someone that wants to build something, and the Boston Temple is so important? The lawyers discussed, as I understood it from the people that were there, that the church really can't back down on any of these places where they're trying to build a temple. Because if they back down in just one place, then other towns can use that as an example of saying, look, you didn't build it there, you can't build it here. So from what I understood, from what these people described to me, the game plan is to fight to the death, because it's not just a temple in one place, it's a temple everywhere. If there's one little variation, if they, allow that, that can affect every other place that they're trying to build. So that was fascinating. I think
Yes.
everybody's just stunned. I'm sorry. Nobody has any commentary. It's just a head shaker. I know. So we have one last slide, I think, and then I'll tell everybody about the meeting tomorrow night. So did you have a comment?
Are you talking about what happened this after or tomorrow afternoon before the meeting?
Yeah, I'll talk about that for sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, and then like I said, I tried to prepare a podcast. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, hey, what am I going to end on for the podcast that I was doing, And right at that minute, I got a message from another person that had been in that meeting. And this person said, when the church needs to rally their troops around to get a temple built, who did they send to Texas, where this person is? They sent 3 lawyers and an Area 70 who had 34 years of experience in journalism. They didn't send the prophet or an apostle or even a missionary to bear their humble testimony of the power of God being felt in the temple. They sent 3 lawyers and a journalist to coach us on what parts of the temple to bear our testimony about, how to evade reporters' questions, and which petitions to sign. And I thought that was really sad. That actually made me sad. But I thought I would, end that portion on it. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I'll just say the same thing. The only way you beat this is if you put up a wall of resistance at every single stop the church makes to build one of these.
Yeah, and as Rebecca has been reporting so well, half of it, if not more than half of it, gets done before anything's announced.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to be on top of every little thing that's going on in your community with zoning in your city.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not even in your community. It could be a blanket zoning change, which happens to affect your community because somebody's gotten in there ahead of you to get it changed so that, I don't know, a year or so further in the future, they'll change the zoning of your community, now make it fit this other thing they changed before. And now you can have Godzilla in your backyard too.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. But why would a normal person even think about that? Why would they even know? We know temples are announced. No one else in the world understands that there might be one on the way to their town. So yeah, it's very easy to do. And as I reported in my episode that I did on the Peruvian temple, where the person we talked to felt that perhaps even international country laws had been changed, the temple builder that this person interviewed said, this is what we do. It's very easy to change the codes in residentials and ask for, a variance. So it's just kind of standard practice. So as far as what's happening tomorrow in the daytime in Fairview, there's a meeting with the powers that be, the church and the church's lawyers, and they'll go in and talk behind closed doors with the town council. I think you probably, RFM, can guess more about what might be happening at that meeting prior to the public meeting.
I can't even believe the city council is doing this, okay? Because the optics are so bad. Only if they have in mind that they are already going to go ahead and vote this down tomorrow night, would there be any sense at all? And I still don't think there's good sense in having a meeting with their attorneys for one party. I mean, really, come on. If they don't turn that down or vote it down tomorrow night and they vote for it after they meet with church attorneys privately the day before the vote, yeah, that's not going to look good.
No, but they're in a really tough spot, as all these cities are, because RLUIPA, they threaten them with suit by the Department of Justice. They tell them their interpretation of RLUIPA. A lot of these towns, like you said, getting up to speed quickly, don't understand, that's not quite the right interpretation. It's also, there's variety in how it can be interpreted. It's written very loosely. So you don't know, if you take this all the way to a judge, which way a judge is going to go. So I can understand these towns where they just say, I give up. I can't do this. I can't afford this. I give up. And so you really can't blame these towns for not wanting to take this on when your opponent has unlimited funds, beyond unlimited funds. So I feel the only thing is what Bill says, just time after time, over and over again, on the backs of the cities before. It just has to become such a pattern that everyone's aware, and then it stops. But collateral damage is just the most tragic part.
Yeah, the first 5 cities that decide to stand up to them are going to take a whooping and lose so much money that they're not going to function. And again, who's willing to be that courageous to do that at the expense of their own people? And I just want to note, a church that has a persecution complex, a church that felt like it was bullied all through the 1830s and 1840s, has now become the bully, has now become the persecutor, has now become the thing that chases other people down and beats the dead horse.
And I think there's one reason for it, and it's called money.
Yeah.
Money is power. They have all this money now, and they have all this power. And apparently they don't have any compunction about throwing it around. Now, Rebecca, about a city saying we can't fight this is one thing, but a city making that decision to vote for it and having the meeting with the church lawyers the afternoon before, still bad decision, bad call.
Bad luck.
Yeah, and I don't know all the pieces in play there. I don't know all the pressures, I know all these cities that I'm close to, just the residents are wonderful, and they're hoping that their councils, their planning commissions will be able to do what they're supposed to be doing, that they have been voted in to do, and that is protect all residents, LDS and not LDS, and do what's best for the city. But it's so complex. And I agree with your analogy, Bill. I think that the church has always been the David in the David Goliath, and that's worked for them very well. And now they're the Goliath. I don't think they recognize that. And it's a bad look when they try to intimidate these little towns. So we will see what happens. The meeting is tomorrow night, Tuesday the 4th. It's at 7:30 Central Time. I will put a link on the newscast, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Anybody can log on. Again, it's a regular town council meeting, so there will be other items on the agenda. I've heard it's sort of in the middle, so whatever time that would be, you can check back and forth. But it is fascinating to see these inner workings and to see this firsthand. I would encourage everybody to log in and just take a look. It's really pulling back the curtain.
Okay, really good. Thank you so much for all your reporting and research on this important issue, Rebecca, and also hi out there to Landon. Rebecca, do you have anything else you want to say before we close the show for the night?
Whew, I think I've said enough, but again, I really am starting to feel more and more just for the LDS members who are put in this position in addition to the residents. So it's kind of a lose-lose all the way around.
Okay, well, you, as a church, as a person, as an organization, I won't give you the analogies, but you don't want to put your people in a position where you have a third party that's supposed to be the enemy, and now your people start agreeing with the third party that actually you're the enemy. Because that's what's starting to go on. You don't want to put your people in that position. That's not going to be a good situation for you to be in, LDS Church. I'm just telling you now. But if that's everything for tonight, Bill, any final words? Rebecca, any final words?
Is now a time to sort of talk about other things going on in our world? Okay.
Now is the time.
Then I'll just note at 2 p.m. today, Rebecca Biblioteca in Landon Brophy released an episode where I had a debate of sorts with Michelle Stone. We talked about the land deeds and whether they are good evidence that Joseph Smith is the originator of polygamy. I really appreciated the conversation. I hope folks that have listened have enjoyed it. And if that's an interesting topic to you, I would highly suggest jumping over to the Mormonish YouTube channel and checking out that. And I would really appreciate also leaving your comments there so I can sort of get a feel for what you thought about the conversation and if it changed your mind at all, either way.
Well, Bill, I wouldn't ask you I wouldn't presume to ask you since you were involved in this debate, but Rebecca, how'd it go? How'd Bill do?
I thought it was great. I thought, Bill and Michelle have kind of been going around and around about the land deeds for a while now and had even tried to get together and have this discussion and debate earlier, and it kind of fell apart. Talks sometimes do. So coming on Mormonish was amazing. We were really happy to have both of them, and it was a civil dialogue. It was a back and forth. There was a little push back and forth, a little bit of feistiness, but each person was very prepared, very professional. I really admired both of them for their scholarship and the different the completely opposite points of view that they were presenting. So yes, please, it's on Mormonish Podcast. You can go and check that out. And it was really interesting, about 2 hours long. So it was really good.
Do you have anything coming up you want to tell the audience about, Rebecca?
Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about what episode to even release this week. I know that we did release, like I said, at midnight, our episode about kind of what we discussed tonight, everything going on with the McKinney Temple. And tomorrow night, we probably will be, as we watch this meeting, putting out some shorts and things on Mormonish Podcast. So I can't see anything but temples in my future for the next little while. What about Mormonism Live? What is coming up on Wednesday? I guess I should ask either of you guys.
I think Bill should answer that one.
Woo.
Yeah, I'm sort of still deciding, but what I think we're going to do, I want to make sure we give some time to this. I think what we'll end up doing is RFM has had a lot of really cool insights on the Book of Mormon, and him and I had a conversation maybe a month ago about the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon, about the brass plates. And so I think we'll have sort of kind of an insightful conversation about the Book of Mormon and cool things that have come up over the last few months. And I hope that makes for an interesting episode.
Yeah, did you know there was this gold Bible that was found? It was like a gold book. It was the size of 2 postage stamps over in Arabia. Did you know that?
Yeah. I heard about that.
That was like zoom and key rash.
It was within 2 hours. It was done.
Then
this gold book had a little more staying power. The one we're going to talk about had just a little more staying power.
Is that the Book of Mormon?
Yeah.
You see, it's not that easy to do.
No.
Not that easy. Joseph Smith had it go up. It didn't go up as fast, but it went up and it's staying up. And it's like the second most popular book, judged by sales, or at least purchases.
Transfer.
Okay.
2 million copies.
Delivery of a controlled substance.
Did you guys happen to catch my episode about the ISYN version of the Book of Mormon?
Yes.
Yes, that was very interesting, wasn't it?
I stopped off when you got done talking about me.
What?
I stopped when you got done talking about me.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, exactly. RFM just watches the mention of him.
Talk about me. Then I'll listen the whole way through.
Well, no, it was a very interesting episode, and we dropped it last week. It was somebody who used text replacement, and this person replaced every time it says, and it came to pass with, "I shit you not." And it changes the whole look and feel of the Book of Mormon. And then he started crowdsourcing all of the other phrases. Holy Ghost is now spooky boy, right? Circumcision is now snip, snip. Behold is now, you won't believe. It's just crazy. And so we read the whole first chapter of Nephi on our podcast, which is called the ISYN, the I You Not Book of Mormon. And now, interestingly, we have had some requests to self-publish this in a book that people can maybe take to sacrament meeting and skim through. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens.
Okay, there's only one thing. I didn't catch that title again. What does ISYN stand for again, Rebecca?
Fine. The I shit you not. Yeah.
Okay. Are you
exactly
kidding me?
Yeah.
I don't know if Growling Alice likes the name of that book.
I don't know. She's growling a little bit. So anyway, perhaps look for that later. The ISYN, which if you pronounce it, it's the I Sin Book of Mormon version. So we'll see.
And you sin every time you say it.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, John, wherever you've gotten to, for letting me use your studio tonight. Thank you for joining me, Rebecca and Bill. Real thank you, everybody who is watching the show. We appreciate you so much. And hopefully next week we'll be here again with another episode of the Mormon Newscast. See you then, everybody. Bye-bye.